Welcome back everyone to Gotcha Interact. Today we'll be taking a look at the first half of the 5.2 banners today. Talking first about Chasca, a brand new character, and hopefully if you guys watch the live stream, you already know a little bit about her. And the other character that's sharing a banner on her is going to be Lyney. So we're looking at two bow characters on these banners. So let's go through both of these banners and see if the characters or their weapons are going to be good pulling options for you.
And if you do enjoy the video, go ahead and like and subscribe and check out the rest of the channel for other videos you may find interesting. We do also have a Discord you can join. We have a link in the description, so check that out if you are interested. Now, on to the video.
Once again, the first character we do want to talk about is going to be talking about Chasca. Looking at her, she is going to be an Anemo-specific DPS. Now, this is more of an overview, so if you guys want to know more about her as a character, in the past we made a pre-release talking about her a little bit, or kind of like an idea of looking at her as a character. There have been some changes, but overall her kit has kind of stayed the same in how it works. So in a very basic sense, if you want to learn more about that, go check out that video. But in a basic sense, she's going to ascend into crit rate, so trying to figure out that crit rate, crit damage ratio, it's going to be pretty easy with her ascending into one of the two. By using her skill, though, she is going to go and basically ride a like 6-shooter pistol, and then while doing so, though, she's going to enter into her Night's Soul Blessing state. When she does so, she'll be increasing her movement speed and interruption to resistance, which will be nice so she doesn't get knocked out of the air, kind of like another Anemo character that we know. But in this state, Chasca will continuously consume Night Soul points, so some characters will either slowly build up their Night Soul points, she's going to be consuming them, and she will be using normal and charge attacks in this state as a hold or a tap version to do damage. In the tap version, she's just going to do normal Anemo damage, but the whole point of Chasca is really to do this hold version to do these charge attacks. And you'll kind of see in the upper right hand corner while you're in your Night's Soul Blessing state riding this gun very funnily, you're going to be getting like these 6 bullets that are going to come up. The first 3 bullets are going to be Anemo bullets initially when you use the skill. The 4th, 5th, and 6th bullets are going to be based a little bit differently. They will change into different elements based on the elements of your party members. So if your party members are any of the elements of the core 4, the bullets will change to the corresponding elemental type of those characters. So if you have Farina as your first or your second character in the party, your 4th bullet will be Hydro. If you have Diona as your 5th character, then you will have a Cryo bullet as in your 5th chamber. And then that'll kind of be the idea. Keep in mind, though, as well, her 6th bullet is going to be kind of like moved a little bit differently to the front and whatnot, so there's some differences in there. But as soon as you get all 6 bullets up, you're then going to be shooting all 6 bullets at one time. Keep that in mind as you are running with that, because that'll kind of help out. You're not going to be doing them repetitively one after the other. It'll kind of have like a blast effect all at once. So it is nice. She uses actually, so half of her bullets are going to be Anemo and half her bullets are going to be other elements. Very interesting way that an Anemo character has kind of worked. Her burst is going to also be similar, although it is one huge damage hit. It'll also be kind of similar with its elemental conversion, doing Anemo and a difference of some extra damage hits from the other elements in the party members that you have.
Now taking a quick overview look at Lyney, he basically works off of charged attacks solely. So getting right into his kit, and because we've never really talked about him in depth before, I'm going to go over his skills in brief and then just kind of in summary just talk about like what he actually does. So with his charge attack, he's going to perform a more precise aim shot just like any other character, but he actually has charge levels, and when you get to charge level 2, he will fire a prop arrow that deals pyro damage, and upon hitting an opponent, it will summon a Grin Malkin hat. Now also, when firing this prop arrow, and when Lyney has more than 60% HP, he will consume a portion of his HP to obtain 1 prop surplus stack, and you can get a max of 5 of these. The effect will be removed after the character spends 30 seconds out of combat. Now, the lowest Lyney can drop to through this method of HP loss by firing the arrow is 60%. So if you drop below 60%, it won't take any more HP from him. Looking specifically at the Grin Malkin hat, this taunts nearby opponents, drawing fire towards him, and each opponent can only be taunted by the hat once every 5 seconds. Do note that the hat's HP is based off of Lyney's max HP, and if it is destroyed or it just simply expires, it will fire off a pyrotechnic strike at one nearby opponent, dealing pyro damage. Also note that only one of these hats can exist at one given time. Looking quickly at his skill, he's just going to deal an instance of AoE pyro damage, and it's going to clear all prop surplus stacks that we previously just talked about with his charge attack. So you use the charge attack to get a prop surplus stack, and then using the skill clears these. And remember, he can get up to 5 of these. And the more you have of these stacks, the more damage that his skill will deal. Also, if the Grin Malkin hat is on the field at the time you use the skill, it will also blow up, dealing damage in the form of a pyrotechnic strike. And the nice thing about this is the damage dealt through this Grin Malkin hat is considered charged attack damage. So not only are you going to be speccing high into a lot of his personal charged attack arrow hits for damage, but also as you're building him to deal charge attack damage naturally, this is also helping the Grin Malkin hat explosion damage as well. Looking quickly at his burst, Lyney himself will actually turn into a Grin Malkin cat, not to be confused with the hat version. And when he gets close to opponents in this kind of form, he'll send flames falling down on them, and it's going to deal an instance of pyro damage to each opponent that he does hit. When the duration of this cat form of Lyney ends, he will dismiss the Grin Malkin cat and ignite fireworks that deal AoE pyro damage, summoning one Grin Malkin hat and grant himself 1 prop surplus stack. So overall, basically the way Lyney works is you use his charged attacks, you can also use the burst, he gets a bunch of prop surplus stacks with a max of 5, and then you use the skill, clearing those prop surplus stacks and dealing more damage based on the more stacks you have, and just a lot of charged attack pyro damage. Chasca is upon us, but with the Pyro Archon looming on the horizon, we are all making sure we have enough Primogems to pull her. Want to give yourself the best shot at bringing Chasca home without overspending? That's where Loot Bar comes in. With Loot Bar, you can top up your account at a discount so you can pick up Chasca and still afford Mavwika. Loot Bar keeps things simple and secure. The only thing they need is your UID and server. No passwords or emails are needed. And for those late night, last minute pulls, Loot Bar offers 24/7 live chat support. It's the backup you need, especially when luck feels like, well, it's not on your side. If you're still on the fence, just check out over 13,000 player reviews praising Loot Bar. Plus, your currency will hit your account in just 30 minutes or less. Other creators use Loot Bar too. Click the link in the description or pinned comment and make the smart choice with Loot Bar. Now, back to the video.
Now we're going to be looking a little bit beyond the character banners. We're going to be talking about the specific weapons, the 5-star weapons on the weapon banner. Now looking at the first weapon, we see Chasca's weapon, Astral, Vulture's Crimson Plunge. A bunch of words basically. Just basically, she's going to be getting 608 base attack at level 90 with 66.2% crit damage, which we're going to see similarities between these two weapons. Look in the refinement though, it states that for 12 seconds after triggering a swirl reaction, attack increases by 24%. In addition, when 1 or 2 or more characters in the party are of a different elemental type from the equipping character, the damage dealt by the equipping character's charge attacks is increased by 20 or 48%, of the elemental burst damage is increased by 10 or 24%. The 20% charge attack increase and the 10%, the lower numbers are basically going to be based if you have one other character in the party that's a different element than Anemo, or the specific character is holding it, which in this case would be Chasca. If they're of the same element, you won't get any stacks. Looking overall at the weapon, we can obviously see you want someone who's a bow character that's going to want, obviously, specifically damage, usually DPSs. But what we're seeing here is triggering a swirl reaction is going to give you a buff, and in addition, you're going to get this extra buff for charge attacks and elemental burst damage. The thing is that with these buffs, you want a different type of elemental, type of a different character. So with a character like Lyney, who's on the other side of the banner, usually we try to see if the weapons on banners can be used for the other character, especially if they're the same weapon. The whole point of Lyney, which we're going to see soon, is having a bunch of characters that are the same element as Lyney, so more pyro characters on him to help him out, as you probably heard Riff talk about as well, and passive talents help that as well. But with Chasca, it's all about having different characters, having like at least 1 or 2, mainly trying to have 2 different types of elemental types in the party that are of the core 4 away from her so that she can do a lot more damage. Because of that, we kind of see the idea that these weapons aren't probably going to be compatible on either character. But obviously with Chasca, it's going to be her best weapon because it is her personal weapon. But besides that, personally, with every other bow character, I don't necessarily seeing a lot of characters that are going to be extremely happy to use this. Now, you could argue someone like Auron or something like that could be helpful a little bit, but once again, you care about swirling and you care about charge attack and elemental burst damage. So it's hard to find someone that you can kind of make that work with, unless it's someone like Farazan, you're trying to do a DPS type build and having maybe different elements in the team. I don't know, Rift, what are you thinking about? Are there any other real characters that would like this besides it just being a stat stick for the main stat?
I actually think you're absolutely right. It's very obviously tailored for Chasca, and like we have been seeing more and more as the game's been progressing, the weapons are seeming to become a little bit more niche to the specific character that it goes to. And honestly, because with Chasca's weapon, you have to trigger a swirl reaction, and then you get all of these different buffs, because if you're not, doing a swirl reaction, you're basically not getting anything. You're only getting the 24% attack, and then it just says in addition when one or two characters are different. So I guess you're going to get some charge attack damage, you're going to get some elemental burst damage naturally, which is honestly pretty nice. So if you do happen to get it, yeah, you can use it as a stat stick for other characters, but if you're like trying to pull it for a different character that's not Chasca, honestly, I can speak for you too, Vixen. I wouldn't recommend doing that, because even when we look at damage type of characters, if there are other 5 stars, just pull their weapon instead if you're trying to target a weapon, right? And specifically with the swirling, the only other character that's really going to do that is Farazan, like you stated, and possibly Venti. If you want to go a DPS Venti, you can do that, I guess, and you're going to get things. But, like, I don't think Venti cares too much about charged attacks. And also, the burst damage is nice, though. So that's good. It's an option if you happen to get it, and you're just using a 4-star option on him. I guess you just upgraded your Venti. So it still has some uses, but not very much. So, honestly, I would just say, like you already said, Vixen, just to kind of stay away from this if you can, unless you are getting Chasca.
Yeah, I mean, exactly like you said. The whole point, I was actually going to bring up Venti, which it's just he's such an old character, I don't even think about him anymore. But yeah, I definitely do think that like even an off-field DPS type character like Venti could actually be pretty helpful, because I mean, once again, that elemental burst damage you just talked about could actually be pretty helpful. So if you maybe use the skill or something to maybe create a swirl reaction, get some more attack, gives him some extra damage as well for his burst, that could be helpful. And usually with him being a sub DPS character or a character that's just there for Viridescent or something, getting this way to kind of build him this way still could be helpful, because the other party members are most likely not going to be specifically like, Animo characters. You're usually going to be anything usually but Animo. So definitely some helpful there on that weapon specifically.
But now looking at Lyney's personal weapon, the First Great Magic. So looking at this, it's like you said, Vixen, it's pretty similar. It also has 66.2% crit damage at max level, base attack of 608, also the same. And looking at the ability, assuming it's Refinement 1, it states that damage dealt by charged attacks increased by 16%. And for every party member with the same elemental type as the wielder, including the wielder themselves, gain 1 gimmick stack. For every party member with a different elemental type from the wielder, gain 1 theatric stack. When the wielder has 1, 2, or 3 or more gimmick stacks, attack will be increased by 16, 32, and 48% respectively. And also when the wielder has 1, 2, or 3 more theatric stacks, movement speed will be increased by 4%, 7, and 10% respectively. So obviously here, you don't really care too much about the movement speed usually. If you're going for damage builds, obviously, you care about that massive attack increase, which means you're needing to use a lot of the same elemental type characters. In Lyney's case, being his personal weapon, you already are going to be doing that because Lyney works mostly in Mono Pyro. Now, obviously, and we'll talk about this more in the team section, guys, he can work in other teams, vaporized teams, like usually Farina's there just because of how powerful Farina is. So it's not like he's stuck to Mono Pyro, but he tends to just work really well with it because he's kind of designed for it. Once again, he can work outside of it, which is a good thing for him, if anything. But anyways, getting more attack with the same element, so using characters like Bennett Xiangling, I think Mavwika coming out would be a great support character to use with him. And just any other pyro characters, you're getting that buff. And to get the max, you only need 3 because the weapon does, like it says, include the wielder themselves. So just having 2 other pyro characters, you're already getting the max 48% attack, as well as just the 16% charge attack damage that you get right off the start. So obviously a very good weapon. We all know Lyney, once again, wants to use charged attack damage. So usually for artifact sets, and you can use Marshal-Zay, but let's say you're not using Marshal-Zay, anything that's helping charge attack damage, maybe giving him just more attack, stuff like that. So very good weapon. And honestly, because it's kind of tailored around charged attacks and also just giving some attack. Any other character in the bow roster, that is, the bow characters, if they do charged attacks and they use attack for their scaling for damage, they can use this weapon pretty well. So like, this is actually a good alternative for using it on Tighnari. Yes, he wants EM a little bit more, but he still does scale on attack as well, just like Sino or Alhaitham or even Nahida. So this is a very good weapon. The higher base attack, you still want the crit, so you can definitely use it for him. There's also Sethos. If you just want to make your Sethos absolutely and utterly cracked, then there's your pull right there. But once again, I wouldn't really target the weapon unless you're getting it for Lyney. Maybe you do want to upgrade your Tighnari and you use your Tighnari a lot, and if you do, it could be worth it, but just know that it's not going to be, I know that's not going to be worth it for everyone. So I'm not telling you, oh yeah, pull this weapon for Tighnari. Obviously, his personal weapon's actually going to be better, but his personal weapon's ridiculously hard to get. I think the next chance we would have at getting it would actually be on the next Chronicled Wish. Whenever we get that, it could be another 2 years or something, because we've been waiting for a long time as it is. But also, there's other characters too, Ganyu, really whoever you're doing charge attack builds on, that you can use this weapon.
I definitely think this is more of a stat sticky type weapon, especially, and yes, it's the kind of help with the charge attack. Just keep in mind, even characters like Ganyu can use other cryo characters in the team, but usually you want to get some other pyro characters, even some type of burning melt type thing where you need like Dendro and pyro. That at least takes 2 slots out of there, and usually you want a shielder of a different element of some sort to try to help you out there. So it's difficult with her, but I definitely do think characters, especially like Tighnari, work the best probably. He's the second runner-up because he likes other Dendro characters, and even having 2 other Dendro characters in there, so 3 Dendros, he works really well in a spread team. So having a character like Fischl or Yaimiko or even a Raiden Quick Swap being the only other Electro character can make it work extremely well with him to actually make it worth it to actually get everything out of the weapon. But like you said, at least the charge attack buff doesn't make it a little bit more useful for more characters rather than the other weapon that we saw. But besides that, let's go ahead and talk about the next section, which is looking at our question section, looking at, do you need either of the characters that we see here on your account? Looking at the first character to answer that question, we see Chasca. Now, with Chasca, there is a love-hate relationship I have here. I love the Animo characters. I think the Animo character roster is extremely cool. It has a lot of backstory, a lot of trauma almost, but it's almost actually enticing. It's a really, really good story to really connect with each of the characters. And each of them have really had a very strong impact on the game. Characters like Venti, characters like Zhao, who have constantly come back in the game. Even Farazan, who have stuck a lot in people's minds because of Sumeru. I think a lot of characters that are in the Animo roster have stuck in people's minds and made a very big impact in Genshin Impact. So I think that overall, Chasca is going to be a very cool character. But talking about needing on your account, if you kind of don't have one of those other previous DPSs, mainly looking at characters like Wanderer, who also had a big impact on the game, or you don't have Zhao, that's really the only reason you'd be going after Chasca for an Animo DPS. But once again, keep in mind, she's an Animo DPS. It's kind of like Eula being a physic or a cryo, DPS. The major point of where she's doing most of her damage is through physical. Chasca here, she's even probably going to be running on an attack percent goblet instead of an Animo damage bonus goblet, because she's going to be doing so many different elements. You just would rather run attack to just get the buff for all the elements rather than just one. So I think that overall with her as a character, she's going to be extremely fun to play with, and I think running her with a character like Auron, who is going to be running a lot of Electrocharge teams, so having Farina in the team, who's a really good buffer, with Chasca, throwing a new character like Auron, one of the 4 stars, probably that's going to be on the banner, which we know, and then throwing another Hydro or Electro character in there, with also keeping in mind that Electrocharge is getting a buff to its damage. I think that's going to be an extremely good team. So I don't want to say that it's not going to be a good, idea to pull Chasca. Just remember what you're going in for. So if you do have an Animo DPS, it can slightly sway you to not pull her, but also keep in mind it can be, considering she is more than just offering Animo to a team. She's offering a lot of different high damage hits. I know some other characters like Wanderer can swirl a lot, but the main point is the Animo damage. She can actually do big damages for different elements and can kind of change actually depending on your needs, whether that's for the Abyss or if that's for the Imaginarium Theater. She's definitely going to be a really, really fun character. Looking at the other side, looking at Lyney. Lyney, I think, has the highest damage possibility in the game. That being said, a lot of people don't like his playstyle. If you like his playstyle, awesome, run with it. Personally, for me, I'm not a fan of Lyney. Also, we talked about a character who Tao, I think, is more fun than him. Also, Arlecchino is going to be stronger, and in my personal opinion, even more fun than him. But definitely a good character. Lyney's a strong character and also a very fun character. Very easy to build as well. We get a free Xiangling. Bennett's in the shop. Most people have Bennett. You already have some of his best characters there. You can get Sucrose as well to kind of just make the team just have a Viridescent user in there. Fenty, Kazuha, even Shilonen can help the team. I think that building his team might be just as easy, if not easier, than building a Chasca team. It just kind of depends. So I think that there's a lot of good usages kind of between the different characters there, but overall, I don't know, Rift, what are you thinking about these two characters on? Do you need the character? Do you not need the character? I think they're both a little bit more, if you're more invested in the game or if you're a little bit further in the game, that's when you pull these types of characters.
Yeah, I don't think I could agree anymore. They are just characters like you said, you're further in the game. They're kind of just a for fun pull. The interesting thing about them, though, is they technically are very free-to-play friendly type of characters in just like how they work. They're not that difficult to use compared to just other options in the game. There definitely are harder characters to use. They both have very newer player friendly teams like you were talking about. You know, Lyney just needs some very easy to get characters right from the beginning of the game. And I think, you know, just with Chasca, because she's so flexible with how she deals damage, she can kind of just work with any kind of off-fielder of these different elements, which means she's going to have a lot of very viable teams, right? She's obviously going to have like a best in slot team for her, like in terms of Abyss, which is probably always going to incorporate using Farina, some other just goated supports, and probably maybe Ororon is in that team, who knows? But obviously, just because of her flexibility, she can use so many different things, which naturally makes her very, very easy to use with all manner of different characters, making it a very good option for a newer player. It's just, does the newer player want to get to endgame content as fast as humanly possible? We'll have to just kind of see how Chasca plays out and see just how good her damage is when she is here. So I guess that's kind of going to still be up in the air, but I think you said it best, honestly. But looking next at our next question, we're going to talk about what kinds of teams are you trying to build? And jumping right in with Chasca, like I was just actually talking about, she's so flexible because she can take these different elements of the core 4, kind of weave them into her personal animo damage, and you're just dealing basically soup team in one character. She's just dealing a bunch of different damage. So actually, I like how you pointed out, Vixen, that instead of using an animo damage bonus goblet, I'm also going to bet on the fact that she's probably going to be using an attack goblet, just so she's buffing, or you're the player in this case, you're buffing all types of damage she's dealing, no matter if she's throwing in some Hydro and Pyro or Electro or maybe some Cryo. You're buffing all of that damage because she's probably going to scale on attack and just buff all of that instead of only buffing her personal animo damage. Now, I'm sure she's going to have some interesting mono animo teams that involve using Farazan, or let's say you have, like, I don't know, the C2 gene and whatnot. There's probably a way you can make her do that, and she probably won't be terrible for that. Who knows? Once again, we'll just kind of have to see. But obviously, she's designed to work with other elements, and she's going to probably, in most scenarios, deal more damage that way. Obviously, one of the best supports in the game, Farina, kind of makes sense for that because it's helping that, but also she's just good anyways. So I think for teams with her, you're definitely doing a lot of different elements. I think for best in slot team, once again, Farina, I think Ororon's going to be a very powerful option, just kind of depending on what he can bring to the team, maybe also factoring in his personal damage. There's the classic duo of Bennett Xiangling, and then maybe based on Mavuika's kit, Xiangling can get replaced, so she'll be a good option. Who knows if Shilonen is still good? I know she's Geo, but if, you know, Chasca and Shilonen both want the other two characters to be one of the core 4 elements, that means you're helping both Chasca and Shilonen, and therefore you're helping those two other characters damage, but you're also helping, in Chasca's case, a little bit of her damage even from Shilonen. And also Shilonen's going to be the healer in that team, so you can be offensive with those two other options. I think there's just so much to think about when it comes to Chasca because she's so flexible, and I feel like I could just go on, and you'd probably agree with me on most of that, Vixen, but I kind of want to know, what are your thoughts for Chasca's teams?
I think with Chasca's teams, I mean, you put it kind of perfectly. I think the biggest thing also to keep in mind with her is that mainly because of passive talent that she has, by using more like elemental characters that are of different elemental types, you're going to be able to get an extra like chamber bullet. So instead of like the first 3 bullets being Animo, the 3rd bullet is now also going to have a chance to be, or it's going to change, but it's going to be a chance between those 3 elements, which one it's going to be. So that's also something to keep in mind. Also, each elemental type that Chasca has in the team will give a stack of Spirit of the Radiant Shadow that she has, which increases the damage of her charge attack skill that she has. So although those other elements can kind of work, or maybe specifically the only Animo team can technically work, just keep in mind that you are focusing a lot on making sure that she's, that's the major way you're going to get a lot of your damage out. So once again, that's going to be kind of the whole reason to keep her where she is.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like it's a lot like Shilonen, where she's most preferable in the healing edition or version of herself, and you're naturally using these 2 other elements. You're getting the resistance shred, whereas she also does have a mono Geo team option where she's actually now going to be dealing damage instead of healing. It's just not as preferable in most scenarios. So I feel like it may be like that, and so Chasca, I'm sure someone's going to try to do mono Animo just to kind of test it out and see just how good it can be. Looking at Lyney real quick, he's pretty straightforward, and we've kind of already touched on it a little bit, but Lyney really pushes for mono Pyro in his kit, also his personal weapon, giving him all that extra attack for just using other Pyro characters, assuming you have the weapon on him. So obviously you've got the dynamic duo of Bennett Xiangling, Mavuika when she comes out, and just using other off-field Pyro. If, let's just say you don't have these other options, which, why don't you have Bennett? You should get Bennett. Also, Xiangling's free. Like, come on, folks. So, like, he has very easy and free-to-play friendly teams to build, and even though he's designed for mono Pyro, that doesn't mean he can't work outside of that. There are actually some vaporized teams you can do that involve using Farina to have that HP drain, and then, Lyney regenerates his own HP just if you're using his kit and through natural gameplay and rotations, you're getting a lot of that HP chain. So Farina is a good teammate. She's a lot of personal damage. We all know she's just an S-tier character with all the buffing, all of it. She does everything. So you can do a vaporized team. You can I would still use another Pyro character in a team like that just to get the attack buff from the Pyro resonance, but also if you do have the weapon, you still are getting a little bit more attack from that as well. Farina is probably enough application on her own, just because Lyney is a charged attack character, so his attacks aren't ridiculously fast. You can actually wait to see when you have applied Hydra on the enemy, and you can make that work pretty consistently, and Farina is very automatic, no downtime with her skill, so it can work very well. Obviously, I think you should just always use Bennett for the massive buff. Once again, he's also Pyro. And I'm sure there's other teams out there, but honestly, when it comes to Lyney's more favorable teams, it's either mono Pyro or some vaporized team that involves using Farina. And once again, I'm sure there's other stuff out there. You could do like a Zhongli for a shield if you want, or you need that because based on the enemy you're fighting, you just need the protection against the interruption resistance. So there's going to be other options, but that's kind of just what I think for Lyney. He's just pretty straightforward.
Now we're going to look at our next section talking about, do you need the weapons? Now, overall, when looking at these weapons, I'm just going to answer this pretty quickly. No. Both of these characters have weapons that work extremely good outside of these characters. There's a lot of other 5-star weapons that work pretty well. There are going to be other characters also that have like 4-star weapons and even 3-star weapons that can work pretty well for these characters. And even some like battle pass weapons are going to be pretty solid options for these characters. Keep in mind those battle pass options are going to be crit rate main stat weapons, and by that being so, they're going to be already going into crit rate with the 4 pieces that they're using. Chasca using the Obsidian Codex set and Lyney using the Marechal Say set. By doing so, they're already getting a lot of crit rate, so adding even more is fine on their weapons. That just means that you're going to have to find a lot of crit damage when you're looking at your specific ideas for looking at the actual character itself and the other artifacts. That being said, a lot of these weapons I think are, if you're going to pull the weapon, you don't need it for the character. Like I said, there are plenty of other weapons that can be used. Attack percent main stat weapons, once again the crit rate weapons and those buffs. Even, once again, 3-star weapons that can work pretty well. I think that there are just too many good options outside of these 2 5-star weapons that still can be used. Now, that doesn't mean to say these aren't their best weapons. If you want the best out of your Chasca, get Astral, Vulture's Crimson Plumage. If you want the best out of your Lyney, get the First Great Magic. But to say that they have to work, they can't work without their weapon, would definitely not be true.
Now looking at our last kind of section is kind of just looking at free-to-play investment versus just veteran investment. If you've just been playing a long time, whether or not you're free-to-play and a veteran, or you're a little bit of a spender and also a veteran, but also just full-on whales. You get C6 everything. We're going to look here at this part, specifically constellations, and kind of just determine if you are looking to go a little bit more vertical investment in the character, whether it's Chasca or Lyney. Obviously, pull the weapon first before constellations. Usually, that's not always the case, and that's why we're going to look at these constellations and also just kind of determine which one is better, talking about the C1 or the C2, and also is the character still worth at C0? Do they actually need a constellation at all? So kind of jumping right in and looking at Chasca, her first constellation states that when triggering the passive talent Bullet Tricks Spirit Binding Conversion, the second Shadowhunt shell loaded into the cylinder will be additionally converted into a shining Shadowhunt shell. The chance to trigger Spirit Binding Conversion is increased. If there are party members who meet the elemental conversion type requirements, the chance to trigger Spirit Binding Conversion is increased by 33.3%, up to a maximum of 100%. So what this is basically doing is increasing, first off, you're getting that second shell being able to convert to other kind of element damage, whether that's Pyro, Hydro, Electro, or Cryo. So you're going to deal even more elemental damage and also have a higher chance to get more conversions on the others as well. So just more elemental damage, which could be more damage in the long run because you're also just running an attack percent goblet and you're getting more hits in. Obviously, you have to have the first passive unlocked because that's what it is tied to. And in addition, Chasca's Night Soul point and Phlogiston consumption in her Night Soul's Blessing state is decreased by 30% while out of combat. So this isn't helping in combat, right? That little part right there. But out of combat, you will be able to fly around a little bit more. Based on my knowledge, I know the new mechanic for that is going to be actual flying. Looking at her second constellation, this states that when Chasca takes the field, she will obtain 1 stack of Spirit of the Radiant Shadow from the passive talent Bullet Trick. Also have to have it unlocked for that to work because it's tied into it. In addition, when the Shining Shadowhunt shells from Spirit Range Shadowhunt's multi-target fire hit opponents, they will deal AoE elemental damage of the corresponding elemental type of the Shining Shadowhunt shells equal to 400% of Chasca's attack. This damage is considered charged attack damage, and this effect can be triggered once each time Chasca uses multi-target fire. So in terms of looking at damage, and she is a DPS character, this constellation does seem a little bit better than looking at the first one just in terms of damage. I mean, 400% of attack is a pretty big increase. It is considered charged attack damage, which you're already probably building into just a little bit. If you have the weapon, that does help it a little bit as well. So this seems pretty good. But Vixen, what are your initial thoughts weighing these two different constellations for Chasca?
I think overall there's a lot to kind of go off of, like you kind of stated. I mean, there's a lot to look at in both of these constellations. Overall, I think always getting that first constellation, especially with the kind of pretty good buff here, getting the extra hits off of it is going to work pretty well. Obviously, C0 Chasca is going to work perfectly fine without constellations. I do think the C1 has a pretty nice little idea with getting more of that elemental conversion out a little bit more. So personally for me, I'm leaning towards the C1. Although I do know that C2 definitely comes with a huge extra damage hit that come along with it in that charge attack. So, and it's also considered charge attack damage, so any buffs that you're doing for charge attack damage are also going to increase this buff as well. I think personally the C1 is a pretty good stopping point, but I do know that people are most likely nowadays are kind of already going for the C2 if they go for the C1 if it's pretty good. So I think that's kind of my personal thoughts. Also, the C1 is helping you use less Night Soul and Phlogiston, which outside of Natlin is going to be extremely helpful. I have C2 Shilonen, and the C1 I believe does that as well, so it's extremely helpful for those Natlin specific characters.
Yeah, I think I would agree when I think about it that the C1 is probably just more valuable in terms of thinking about actual combat scenarios and some hard content like the event we just had or just the Abyss last floor. I feel like the C1 still is going to level out to pretty similar in damage, if not even more, just based on your build or even your teams, because you're getting so many more hits in. You're getting more conversions for elemental damage, whereas the second constellation is just adding an extra hit to the entire rotation. It's only one, but it is pretty massive. But still, is that actually worth going to the second constellation? And in my opinion, I don't think so. Honestly, yeah, like you said, C0, I'd sit with just fine. pull the weapon and just kind of walk away and be happy. But the C1 would be kind of a nice increase, and I don't think it's like much of a waste if you are looking for that vertical investment in the character. But looking at Lyney, let's look at his constellations, which thankfully are much shorter. So looking at his first one, this states that Lyney can have 2 Grand Malkin hats present at once. Previously, he can only have 1 on the field at one time. So the C1 allows you to have 2. Additionally, prop arrows will summon 2 Grand Malkin hats and grant Lyney 1 extra stack of prop surplus. This effect can occur once every 15 seconds. So getting that extra stack of the prop surplus is going to be nice, meaning you're going to get a little bit more damage from your skill, and you're going to be able to build up those stacks with a max of 5 again, a little bit faster. But do note that it can only occur once every 15 seconds that you're doing that. Let's look at the C2. This states that when Lyney is on the field, he will gain a stack of crisp focus every 2 seconds. Each stack will increase his crit damage by 20% with a max of 3 stacks. This effect will be canceled when Lyney leaves the field. So basically, this is just, here, have 60% crit damage. And you're going to get that within 6 seconds of him being on the field once you've kind of set up your rotation. So he will have that probably after the second charge attack that you do, or if you're using a skill burst, whatever. So this is pretty good. It's just a straight damage increase. And honestly, with both constellations pretty much just being a straight damage increase, I still think I favor the C1 over the C2, just because, once again, C2, all it is 60% more crit damage. By the way, that's not very bad at all. That's really good. It's just that the C1 allowing you to have 2 of those hats on the field already seems like a pretty big upgrade. They do taunt fire, which means the opponents will attack them if they're closer to it instead of you. So that's kind of nice, something that might not be thought about as much, and probably maybe I am being a little bit optimistic about that, but it is a nice tool to allow him to focus on his charged attacks without getting interrupted if you don't have a shielder or something like that. But also getting that extra surplus stack to get more damage in the skill is just nice. And so I think, in my opinion, I like the C1 better. I think overall, though, I don't think you need any constellations for Lyney. Just pull him, and if you want to go more vertical investment, pull his weapon before the C1. Well, we hope that this video could help you decide on whether these characters or even the weapons coming up on this next banner are for you.
As always, if you guys have any other thoughts or suggestions, please go ahead and let us know down in the comments. That way you can help us, as well as let other people know about these future characters. Make sure to like, subscribe, and check out our Discord as well, as we have a lot of fun over there. Thank you again for watching the video, and we'll see you guys in the next one.